Are you dreaming of visiting Switzerland? Planning a trip to Switzerland is very exciting, but it can also be overwhelming. How do you choose which of the many scenic cities, towns and villages to visit? Which mountaintop excursions should you take? And what's the best way to get around Switzerland? And of course, how much of the country can you realistically see within your time frame? If you've asked yourself any of these questions, this is the podcast for you. This is the Holidays to Switzerland travel podcast, and in each episode, your host Carolyn Schonnefinger chats with Swiss travel experts to answer your most commonly asked questions, provide practical tips, and take you on a virtual visit to the most popular destinations, and of course some hidden gems, to help you plan your dream trip to Switzerland. And you'll hear plenty of conversations about Swiss cheese and chocolate too. Are you ready to plan your trip to Switzerland? Well, let's get started.
Hello, it's Carolyn here. Welcome to episode 97. Switzerland is well known for its fantastic public transport system, and getting around the country by train, bus and boat is the perfect option for visitors, even those of us who aren't used to navigating public transport. For those of us who are used to getting around daily by car, deciding to solely travel by train when on vacation can be a big decision. Countries like the United States, Canada and Australia are huge, and they don't have the railway infrastructure that Switzerland does. So it can be hard to get your head around relying on trains as your sole means of transport. But let me say, travelling by train in Switzerland is easy. I'm sure you've got plenty of questions though, so in this episode I thought I'd answer 15 of the most commonly asked questions about travelling by train in Switzerland. There are numerous articles on holidaystoswitzerland.com about Swiss train travel, and we've recorded lots of podcast episodes on the topic as well, so definitely go and check those out. But the purpose of this episode is to give you quick and concise answers to these frequently asked questions. So let's start with question number 1. Why should I use the trains instead of renting a car to get around Switzerland? Well, aside from the benefits to the environment, there are many reasons why travelling around Switzerland by train is a great idea. Firstly, you can forget about the hassles of finding somewhere to park and the expense that goes with that. As the train stations are located in the centre of cities, towns and villages, you'll be right in the heart of the action when you arrive. And if your hotel or accommodation is located outside the city centre, you can be sure there will be a train or bus connection to reach it. Travelling by train is relaxing and everyone gets to enjoy the view. There's no need for a driver to concentrate on the road. They can sit back and take in the beautiful scenery just as all their fellow travellers do. The Swiss public transport network is extremely efficient and train services are very frequent. With around 5,200 kilometres of tracks, you can get wherever you need to by train and the connecting modes of transport. And because train stations, bus stops, boat piers and mountain railway stations are almost always within sight of each other, it is easy to transfer from one mode of transport to another. You'll rarely wait long for any connections for your train trips through Switzerland either. So you might be wondering if Switzerland has any fast trains like the TGV in France. Well, Switzerland has a modern fleet of trains across the country, but due to the mountainous topography, there are only a couple of high-speed trains, and these mostly connect Switzerland with other countries. These include the TGV Lyria, which connects Switzerland and France, and the ICE trains, which connect Switzerland and Germany. Within Switzerland, these trains reach maximum speeds of 160 km per hour and 200 km per hour respectively, but the journey distance within Switzerland is short. If you're travelling on a non-mountainous route, such as Geneva to Zurich, you may find yourself on board one of the tilting trains, which can travel at up to 200 km per hour. In general, though, as Switzerland is a small country, high-speed trains aren't necessary, as you can travel all the way from east to west or from north to south in just a few hours. Another frequently asked question I hear is, do the trains in Switzerland run on time? Well, yes, they do. Switzerland is famous for its punctuality, and the trains are no exception. In 2022, 92.5% of the trains operating on the Swiss rail network were on time. Amazing. If you've got a train to catch, don't be late getting to the station, or you may find the train departing just as you reach the platform. That being said, most train lines are serviced by at least hourly services, so you shouldn't have to wait too long for the next train. Now, question number 4 is probably the one that I hear the most. It's a question that a lot of people struggle with finding the answer to, and the question is, should I buy individual tickets or a rail pass? And unfortunately, there's no simple answer. In most cases, tourists visiting Switzerland will be better off purchasing a Swiss rail pass or a half fare card rather than buying train tickets individually. But it really comes down to your exact itinerary and how many mountain excursions, if any, that you plan to do. There are so many variables when it comes to buying your individual or point-to-point tickets. And the main factor to consider here is how far in advance you can actually book the ticket. Booking last-minute tickets tends to be the most expensive, so that means you need to be organised well ahead of time if you want to get the best value tickets. And you'll also want to consider if you plan on doing any mountain excursions, like I mentioned, because these day trips alone can make it well worth your while to purchase a pass. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here about the different kinds of individual tickets and the different rail passes that you can buy because we have got lots of articles on the website about these, and we've recorded previous podcast episodes as well. I'll link to all those articles and podcast episodes in the show notes so you can go and take a look at those or have a listen to get more information. But just in summary, if you're considering buying your regular point-to-point train tickets, there are a couple of discounted tickets that you might be able to take advantage of. Super Saver tickets are available for up to 70% off, but these are only available for purchase within a certain time frame prior to your travel date. And the same with the Saver Day Pass, where you can buy a single ticket for a nominated date of travel. Now, with these discounted individual tickets, there are restrictions on them. You must nominate your date of travel and in some cases the time of travel when you purchase them, and they're non-refundable. So whilst you can save money, they don't really offer very much flexibility. When it comes to rail passes, there's the Swiss Travel Pass, which covers the entire country. And then you've got regional passes like the Berner Oberland Pass, the Jungfrau Travel Pass, and the Tell Pass for the Lake Lucerne region. Another option is the half fare card, which offers you 50% discount off any tickets that you purchase. So go ahead, check out those articles and the podcast episodes that I'll link to in the show notes. But in a nutshell, to decide which is best for you, you really do need to list out all the train trips that you plan to do, all the mountain excursions that you plan to do, and tally up the prices for those if you were to buy the tickets individually or if you were to buy a rail pass. And we do have a very handy digital calculator that can help you work out that price without having to crunch all the numbers yourself, and that will be linked in the show notes as well. Now, it's not surprising that the Swiss Travel Pass is one of the most popular transport passes in Switzerland because it really does cover the entire country. But a question that I do often get asked is, what trains does it not cover? And this is a very good question. So to give you a bit of an explanation, the Travel Pass is an all-in-one ticket for the entire public transport network in Switzerland. But what is the public transport network? Well, it consists of trains, trams, buses and boats, and it'll take you to almost everywhere in Switzerland that people live. So this includes mountain villages like Mürren and Wengen, and even Rigi Kaltbad on Mount Rigi. So if there are permanent residents in a village or hamlet, even if it's on the side of a mountain, you'll be able to get there by public transport. The Swiss Travel Pass is valid on that entire public transport network, as I said. So the only trains that it doesn't cover are mountain trains, cable cars, and funiculars that travel to non-residential locations. So to give you a few examples, if you're going to Zermatt, for instance, trains to Zermatt are covered by the Swiss Travel Pass, but the mountain excursion from Zermatt to Gornergrat is not covered because people don't actually live at Gornergrat. Trains to Wengen are covered, but from Wengen to Jungfraujoch, the Swiss Travel Pass does not cover that in full. Trains to Engelberg are covered with the Swiss Travel Pass, but getting from Engelberg to Titlis is not covered. The Swiss Travel Pass does entitle you to discounts off those mountain railways though, and it's up to 50% in most cases. If you're travelling with children, you probably are wondering if there are any price reductions for children, and absolutely there are. Switzerland is a very child-friendly country, and there's no exception when it comes to travelling by train. Children who have not yet reached their 6th birthday always travel for free in Switzerland. Kids who are aged from 6 to 15 years old are entitled to reduced fares, and there are a couple of different options that you can choose from here. If you, as their parents, are travelling with a Swiss Travel Pass or a Swiss half-fare card, you can obtain a free Swiss family card for your children, which entitles them to travel wherever you travel for free. Now, should you, as the parents, not have a Swiss Travel Pass or half-fare card, you can purchase a junior travel card for 30 Swiss franc for each child. And the junior travel card is valid for an entire year and entitles the child to free travel on the entire public transport network. Question number 7 is another that I hear very often. What is the difference between first and second class carriages on Swiss trains? Well, most trains in Switzerland offer both classes of travel. First class seats usually recline and have more legroom, and there are generally fewer seats per carriage and more space for luggage. First class carriages are usually quieter, as more business and adult passengers tend to travel in first class. Now, in second class carriages, the seats cost less, but they're not as spacious, and there are more seats in each carriage. Second-class carriages usually have more passengers than first-class carriages because more Swiss locals tend to travel in second class. Now, to give you a bit of an example of how the carriages are laid out, in first-class carriages, in most cases, there will be a single row of seats down one side of the train. So these will be like in sets of 2, one seat facing into another seat, and then that repeated all the way down that side of the carriage. And on the other side, there'll be 2 seats facing 2 seats, and again, that's repeated down the entire length of the carriage. In second-class carriages, it's usually 2 seats facing 2 seats on each side of the carriage. So you've got sets of 4 all the way down the carriage. As you can see, that means that there will be less people in first-class carriages, and so that generally means there's more space to store your luggage. Some regional trains only have second-class carriages, and a good thing to note is if you're planning on taking a boat trip on one of the beautiful lakes in Switzerland, the boats do have both first-class and second-class. If you've got a second-class ticket, you'll need to stay on the lower deck, but if you have a first-class ticket, you can go up to the upper deck of the boat. Question number 8, do you need to make seat reservations for trains in Switzerland? For most trains in Switzerland, you do not need any seat reservations. You just simply hop on and sit in any available seat in the correct class of travel. On some of the longer distance trains, you can make a seat reservation if you'd like to, but it's not compulsory. However, on Switzerland's panoramic trains, it is mandatory to make a seat reservation, and without this seat reservation, you cannot travel on the train. This applies to the Bernina Express, Glacier Express, Gotthard Panorama Express, and if you plan to travel in prestige class on the Golden Pass Express. Now, the important thing to know here is that it's essential that your seat reservations are purchased well before travel, and you should really book them as early as possible. There are minimal services per day. In some of these trains only operate once per day, so there's extremely limited availability, and in the peak seasons particularly, they do book out, which is unlike the regular trains in Switzerland, which never book out. The booking window for seat reservations differs from train to train, so you do need to do some research and forward planning. So the booking window differs, as I said. In some instances, you can book your seat reservations 3 months in advance. In other instances, for other trains, it can be 11 or even 12 months in advance. Keep in mind that you don't need to have already purchased your ticket or rail pass when you buy your seat reservation. The most important thing is to secure your seat reservation for the panoramic train or trains that you're planning on riding on, and then you can buy your point-to-point ticket or rail pass later on. Now, with the popularity of the panoramic trains, a lot of people are anxious to know that if they miss out on seat reservations, is it still worth travelling by train in Switzerland? Absolutely it is. There are numerous other scenic trains that are fantastic alternatives to those famous panoramic routes that you've heard of. Regular trains also offer the same stunning views whether or not they follow the exact same route. You can also board a post bus for a different way to see the country. Now, a great example is the Bernina Express. If you've missed out on getting seat reservations on the panoramic train, you can travel the exact same route on board one of the regional trains that are operated by Rhaetian Railways. You'll see the same scenery, but as you don't need to book a seat reservation, you also have the option of getting off along the way and resuming your journey on a later train if you'd like to. Whilst you don't get the huge panoramic windows on the regional trains, they do have windows which open, which is great if you're a keen photographer. Now, if you've decided that yes, you are going to travel around Switzerland by train, you're probably wondering if there is room to store luggage on board and how much can you bring. Well, there isn't a huge amount of space for storing luggage on the Swiss trains, but most of them do have a dedicated luggage storage area close to where you get on the train. Some trains also have space underneath and between the seats where luggage can be stored, and there are also overhead racks above the seats where you can place small luggage on most trains. There's no restriction as to how much luggage you can bring, but I highly recommend that you limit yourself to a medium-sized suitcase and just one piece of hand luggage or a backpack. There's no porter service in Switzerland, so you are responsible for taking care of your luggage and getting it from the platform onto the train and onto the storage racks. Now, question number 11 follows on from that. Will I have to lift my suitcase up and down stairs at the stations? And I'm sure we've all seen people in the past, and we've probably had to do this ourselves, where you get to a flight of stairs and you've got to drag or lug or lift your heavy suitcase down that flight of stairs to get to the platform, or even worse, probably up after a very long day. It's not a lot of fun. But the good news is that there's always a ramp or an elevator at Swiss train stations, as well as step-free access to the platform. So for this reason, bringing a suitcase with wheels is perfect. Can I buy food and drink on board? On most intercity and Eurocity trains, there is a restaurant or a bistro for takeaway food and drinks. Regional trains don't usually have snack bars. However, you are always allowed to bring your own food and drinks to consume on board. And if you're wondering, are there toilets on board the trains? Well, most medium to long distance trains in Switzerland have onboard toilets. You'll find them at the end of the coach, indicated by a WC sign. It's not common for mountain railways to have toilets on board, so make sure you use the facilities at the station before you leave. If you're going to be in Switzerland and travelling on a Sunday or a public holiday, you might be concerned that the trains won't be operating. Well, the great news is that, yes, public transport is the preferred mode of transport for the Swiss, so the trains run 7 days per week. So you can always get to where you need to go, regardless of whether it's a public holiday or a Sunday or any other day. And finally, the question that I hear very frequently, where can I find timetables for Swiss trains? The SBB mobile app is the best place to check timetables for all public transport in Switzerland. You can check the frequency of services, departure times, which platform the train departs from and arrives at, where it stops along the way, what facilities are on board the train, and even what the expected occupancy of the train is. The app is updated in real time too, so if there are any delays, which is pretty uncommon as I mentioned earlier, the new arrival and departure times will be shown. Times on the timetable and on the train station display boards are shown in military time. So a train scheduled to depart at 2:15 in the afternoon, so 2:15 p.m, will be shown as departing at 14:15. So do keep that in mind. I highly recommend that you download the SBB mobile app to your device before you get to Switzerland. I hope this episode has answered some of the questions that you had about travelling around Switzerland by train. And if you've still got questions that you'd like answers to, you'll probably find them in my new ebook, The Essential Guide to Travelling by Train in Switzerland. The book goes into more detail about the topics I've covered, plus there's lots more info and tips about Swiss train travel. There are chapters about the different ticket and rail pass options, what to expect at the station and on board the train, info about the different types of trains in Switzerland, including the panoramic trains and mountain railways. The book also features photos and maps to help you plan your Swiss rail vacation. You can get a copy of the Essential Guide to Travelling by Train in Switzerland at holidaystoswitzerland.com/shop, and I'll include a link in the show notes too. And as a special offer for all you lovely podcast listeners, enter the code PODCAST, PODCAST, in the coupon code box when you're ordering, and you'll get 30% off until 31st of May 2024. Thank you very much for joining me today. Until next time, tschüss!